Welcome, everyone. We're going to wait a couple seconds to allow attendees to join this webinar. Hello, my name is Anna. I am the Assistant Director of Constituent Relations, and welcome everyone to this 49er Industry Chat. Before we start, we would just like to inform you that this session is being recorded and it will be available on our website afterwards, csulb.edu/alumni. It goes on our YouTube page. So once it's posted, please feel free to share this with any friend, fellow alumni, or someone that you know that could really benefit from this chat. We also encourage you to utilize the Q&A box or the chat box to submit any questions for our guest speaker. Our alumni relations member, Rosalinda, will be helping moderate the chat during this webinar. We'd also just like to promote CSU Voices. CSU Voices is the Cal State University's advocacy community that keeps CSU alumni informed of the issues shaping the future of the CSU system. By taking simple actions like sending a message to an elected official, you can help influence state and federal policy decisions that affect students, campuses, and communities. So join the CSU Voices and protect access, affordability, and the value of a CSU degree. We will be dropping the links for you in the chat so you could learn more about that initiative and even sign up. I am now going to pass it off to an exciting guest that will help me interview our 49er Industry Chat alumni, and that's Sebastian Rosano Alvarado, who is currently a Cal State Long Beach student. So Sebastian, please take a moment to introduce yourself before we have you introduce Mateo.
Hello everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. It is an honor. Just like Anna mentioned, my name is Sebastián Rosano Alvarado. I am a junior majoring in criminology and criminal justice, actually with a minor in forensic studies. I currently serve as a student lead for our Office of Belonging and Inclusion. I got the amazing opportunity to work alongside our Latin Research Center here on campus, as well as being a senator for our student government and being a volunteer for our Dream Success Center. Just a little bit about me. I always been incredibly passionate about connecting with individuals who have been in the same shoes as myself. It's really an honor to be interviewing an alumni today. And one of the biggest things I always say is that there's always something we can learn from each other. And so I'm excited to get started and hear a little bit more. With that, I would like to introduce our alumni host, Mateo Maya. Welcome, Mateo. I'll start off just by reading your bio before we jump in. Mateo Maya is a senior associate in corporate finance at Capital One and a civic leader advancing political and economic power through advocacy. His experience across the private and public sectors reflects a core belief that advocacy transcends title and career path. It is disciplined practice that shapes institutions and communities from within. Mateo also serves on the executive board of the DC Latino Caucus, advancing civic mobilization, strengthening Latino political representation, and driving policy advocacy in Washington, D.C. and at the federal level. His advocacy began at CSULB as an ASI Chief Government Relations Officer and later at American University as a graduate student president. In those roles, he directed legislative strategy, engaged in state and federal lobbying, advanced governance reforms, and helped establish organizations supporting first-generation and Latino students. His cross-sector experience spans government relations at Long Beach-based investment firm and institutional reforms at the IRS, providing him with direct insight into how public and private power structures function and how they can be influenced from within. Mateo is also the founder of Munai Strategies, a social enterprise spanning economic access through strategic consulting, AI education, and financial literacy initiatives serving underserved and marginalized communities. Across every role, Mateo's work underscores a central idea that advocacy and community leadership are not confined to activism. They can be practiced in any profession and used to influence the systems that determine access and opportunity. Mateo, thank you so much for being here today and welcome.
Thank you, Sebastian. That was a great introduction, and I'm really happy that someone part of ASI is doing this webinar instead of this uh, event. So, yeah, happy to be here and very excited to share some of my experience at Cal State Long Beach and through grad school and now as a professional in the private and public sectors.
Mm. Thank you, Mateo. Again, just as a reminder, our moderator, the alumni team, will be checking the chat for any questions attendees would like Mateo to answer. Now, let's jump into our first question, Mateo. Can you tell me about your experience and what led you to CSULB?
Yes, definitely. So, well, let's start with the beginning, right? I'm originally from Miami, Florida. I moved, however, I grew up in Colombia. My whole family is Colombian, so first generation American, coming from an immigrant background. And then after Colombia, I moved to Bakersfield, California, to finish high school. So when I was in Bakersfield, my first and only thought was, how did I get out of here, right? Because Bakersfield, you have been to Bakersfield, you would know. Uh, so I started applying to every other university, especially CSU, since it was going to be a lot more affordable for myself. And CSULB was always one of the top CSUs and one of the best universities in social mobility in the state. So I think that was one of my top three choices, and we did one of those like senior, you know, trips to tour the universities, and I just fell in love with Long Beach and Cal State Long Beach specifically. And I think one of my main reasons for choosing CSULB was that it was in the city, and I didn't want to be like, in a college campus, in a college town like San Luis Obispo or Santa Barbara or any of other colleges. I wanted to be more in an urban setting, also, close to the beach. So that's always a plus. Uh, but yeah, I think it was a mix of I wanted to get out of Bakersfield. I wanted to go to a top CSU university, somewhere affordable, and that's why I chose Long Beach.
Okay. Okay. I'll be honest, I also chose CSUOB because of the financial situation for me. Personally, it was cheaper than UC. So
Mhm.
now, what was your student experience like at CSUOB? This kind of relating to like clubs, activities, classes, professors, any jobs?
Uh, I think it was great. I feel like I've always been a very involved student since high school, really. So I always volunteer myself to do everything and try to be involved, not just for fun, right? I mean, college is a social experience, and uh, you should be getting to know more people and like building like more friends and that aspect of your social life. Also I not only just in social clubs, I started getting more involved with some academic clubs or tutoring hours and those type of things. I think I also used to dorm, which I know CSULB, I don't know, that probably hasn't changed, but it's a commuter school. So it was easier to just get involved, right? Because I was at Parkside, if I remember correctly, but yeah, one of the dorms. And that just allowed me to meet more people. I was part of a fraternity. I was part of many like Latino, Hispanic organizations like the HSBA, and then eventually I got involved with ASI with the student government. I did like salsa club, and anyways, like so many other things. Like if a friend just invited me to do something, I'll just say yes. Because well, first, because I like to be social, but second, because I'm of the belief that you have to be, uh, there's so many opportunities to be at the right place at the right time, right? So the more I expose myself to social settings, the more I would meet that one person that would be either my best friend for life, or that one person that would get me an internship, or that one person that would connect me with someone to get that job that I needed, right? So I think that's why I wanted to be as involved as I could.
Just to kind of like follow up on that question, did you ever have
Mhm.
any type of like student lead position here on campus? Any type of like work study position?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, I used to have like three jobs. I've always had more than one job. I mean, you probably can relate as a first generation student. There's not a lot of financial assistance coming from your family, so you have to rely on your own work. And also you have to help back home, right? And you can't just abandon your family. So yeah, I had I forgot it was in the admissions department, but yeah, I worked there for like the full 4 years. And I also used to work at a coffee shop at the Long Beach airport. I also did work as a server in one of the a brunch restaurant in by Second Street. Anyways, I had multiple jobs, but yeah, my campus job was the admissions office, like office assistant.
Okay. And then just you did mention ASI, and this kind of like where our next question goes into. So what originally drew you into to advocacy work? Was your journey intentional, or did you kind of just get fall into it?
For advocacy was really I just wanted to be involved in student government. And I think I've always liked politics a lot. And that was at a very politically active um let's say year, kind of like similar to what we're going through right now. So I wanted to do something more, right? And I feel like that's part of like how people get involved with advocacy because it's you want to get you feel you're not doing enough and you feel like you have to do something in whichever way possible. So especially as a student, right? You think you don't have a lot of options, but I mean you do have a lot of resources on campus and the you really start like trying to learn how to interact with those systems, especially those advocacy systems. And student government for me was that outlet, right? And I kind of like fell into this, well, the lobby court, which is what the chief government relations officer kind of leads. And at the beginning, I was first like a student. I forgot the actual name, but yeah, a student at large, I think it was the name. And then I was a senator, and then it was the chief my last year. So, and I learned a lot, really. Thanks to the people, thanks to my fellow students at that time and my friends and all the other ASI members, and also people from the CSULB administration, in government relations, they taught me a lot, right? Because you have to think about not just advocacy, like community advocacy. That position is more of a political advocacy, and like how you learn how to lobby, how you learn how to, engage with legislators. Which, to be honest, like that was the foundation that I needed for a lot of the work that I do now that I used to do in previous positions. Because it's really as long as you're learning the skill, you can utilize it for the rest of your life.
Okay. Now from your experience at the Internal Revenue Service, what surprised you most about institutional reform?
uh, the IRS, probably everyone here on this call can agree, the IRS is a very it's a difficult agency, just in the way, especially in the federal environment and its federal um, I used to do federal consulting. So I used to be a consultant for the IRS. So in that environment, each agency is different. How, the State Department to the Defense Department to Treasury, which IRS is part of Treasury, right? They all operate differently, and it's different every administration, right? Because if you have a Democrat in power, you have a Republican in power, it's going to be different, the way they do things. However, there's some sort of like institutional uh, kind of institutional legacy from that agency that never changes. And at the IRS, it was just a very rigid organization where very disjointed too. Like no one really wanted to take accountability for the changes and reforms that needed to be done. Um, and it has very, and that, I guess, lack of change comes from from the employees. And IRS employees were amazing. They work very hard, right? But a lot of them have been there for like many, many years. And the thing is, when you have an institution with people that have been there for decades, right? They have a certain way of doing things and they have a certain way they like to approach things or solve things because they know the institution more than anyone else, right? So when you have someone new, or like a new graduate, right, or someone, an outsider or a consultant trying to do these changes, there's a lot of pushback to that, right? And we can see this at every level, not just for the IRS or federal agencies, like companies, nonprofits, many nonprofits that I've been part of, like they are very rigid to change. And I'm the type of person that I like change. I like to always be kind of like thinking about what can we do better, what can we do next, and if I'm not gonna be able to do that there, then let's find ways of like doing it in like in other ways, right? So yeah, I think the most challenging was the the pushback to change.
And would you say that this is kind of like what got you into DC Latino Caucus? Can you talk a little bit more about how you got there and how this kind of like all
Yes, so no, I think going back to ASI, I feel like just my me wanting to be more involved since I was a kid, right, since forever, and then shaping those skills at Long Beach, that gave me kind of like the not only the skills and the confidence, right, to just know that I was able to like, create or change the systems within those spaces. So after Long Beach, I worked at a private investment firm in Long Beach. I stayed for one more year, and then I started grad school here in DC, which is what brought me to DC was grad school. And I did a top 10 program at American University. The and it's great. It was an amazing 2 years, amazing program. If someone is interested in international studies or some sort of more international studies topics, please let me know. I can advise you on that. But the issue is that when you're going from Long Beach, which is a very diverse college, a very diverse city, right? Not just diverse racially, not just diverse, but diverse like economically, right? I think Long Beach has, I think 30 to 40% first gen students. It has a lot of more of that diversity. When you go from that to a top 10 private institution, that's not the case. So when I got there, even though there were a lot of like Latinos, there weren't a lot of first gen. I had to create an organization for first gen because we hadn't like there was that didn't exist. That wasn't even cross anyone's minds that grad students could be like first gen, right? Or like that first gen students could not only graduate from undergrad, but could also go to grad school and like have a master's degree or a postgrad degree. So since I was in ASI, I also wanted to be in student government at American University, which I did. I was senator, and then I became like student president. And when in that year, when I was trying to like change things, that's when I created the first gen org, and then I created a Latino org because we didn't have a Latino org either. There were other orgs, but not just for Latinos. Um, so then because of that, then after I graduated, I already had that type of experience and I had that type of like connections to other Latino organizations, like student organizations in DC. And then I got involved with like local politics. I was helping a local campaign for like a council member, and I met the president of the DC Latino Caucus, and then she was the one who kind of like brought me in, and she was one of my mentors pretty much. And now I'm part of the caucus, and I'm part of their executive board.
Okay, so through that role in DC Latino Caucus, what are the most urgent issues impacting Latino political representation today that you've seen?
Ooh, I feel okay. I'm just gonna talk about it locally, but I feel like because DC is a federal, it's also representation of the nation. But the thing is, so when you're in California, everything is kind of like a bubble, right? Politically, at least more than other places, right? You don't really experience how different the country is, or like how people from other states, even people can say like they're all Democrats, right, or Republicans or whatever it is. there's like massive differences from like a California or like a West Coast like Democrat to like a Midwest Democrat or something like that. So when you're in DC, you're in that mix of everything. You're in that mix of like every single person has not everyone is going to think like you, and everyone, even if they're like the same as you or like the same political party as you, they're not might have like completely different thoughts on policy and community advocacy. So the DC Latino Caucus, even though it's part of the Democratic Party, is a caucus for the Democratic Party, there's this challenge of trying to sometimes they like focus on, and this happens for a lot of like just like minority groups or marginalized groups in general. They try to just fit all the issues or represent the community just by one or two issues, right? When like the reality of it is like we are just not we're not all think the same, right? It's like the Latino community or any other minority community. It's very diverse in thought and in political opinions and in all these things, right? So I'll give you an example. Like last week, we had a candidate forum, and people had to submit questions, right, to like to ask for the a candidate forum for mayor. So like the mayor who's running for DC, we had a candidate forum for everyone who's running. And everyone was submitting questions about immigration, which should obviously be one of the top topics for the Latino community. But it was just about immigration and I think immigration education. But like there was no questions about the economy. And like if you go and ask any Latino, I mean, even like my family that doesn't know anything about politics, the only thing they care about is like they can have a job that they can provide for their family, right? And I feel like that's why we have lost a lot of that base is because we're not really listening to what people are saying on the ground, right? We're not really doing that community advocacy and that community engagement that really advances like all the political issues that we're trying to fix at least. So yeah, I think that that'll be the biggest challenge, especially going into the midterms in what 7 months now.
Mhm. So, with all your roles and everything you do, what does a typical day for you looks like?
Uh, okay. So it depends on the day, but I'll give you like my busy day. I mean, I have my full-time job at Capital One, so I work at the headquarters here, and it's one of the I think it's one of the only major banks headquartered outside of New York because Capital One started here was started in Virginia. So I start work at, the usual 9 to 9:30. However, I had a part-time job, which is I work for a firm, like a geopolitical consulting firm, which is called International Capital Strategies. And I am pretty much a contractor. I do kind of like a daily report of everything going on in the world from a geopolitical perspective, kind of impacting financial markets. So I have to write a report. That report I usually do it before my full-time job. So I wake up around 6 a.m. I do my report. It usually takes me 1 hour, but with everything going on in the world and with Iran, it's taking me 2 to 3 hours usually. So I have to wake up earlier. So I finish the report, then I go to work. I finish work around 5, and that's it. And I usually just go work out or go train. I do MMA, and I just come home and make dinner. And yeah, a very regular adult life. Just work and come home.
Is that kind of like something you had like probably like envision when you were younger?
Uh, yes, yes and no. I feel like no one really once you turn I feel like once you're out of college for a while, you start like understanding or like once you're in your like late 20s, early 30s, you start understanding that, not everything is work and not everything is this. And especially I'm a very high achiever type of person. But even for me has been like, okay, let's not burn out because that happens a lot, especially if you're doing a grad school degree or you're doing like multiple majors, whatever it is or jobs too. So I think for everyone, or for most people, it just comes that moment of realization of like what really matters for you and what you need to focus on for your well-being, for your partner, for your, if you have kids or you have pets, like whatever it is, like what makes you happy. And a lot of people in like my age group start doing hobbies, right? Because like you understand that like your job, and most people don't or not passionate about their job, right? Because if you work for corporate America, there's very little to be passionate about. Uh, so I mean, it depends where you work, not the generalizing here, but yes, it's like trying to find that balance of work and like focusing on your well-being.
Earlier today, you focused a little bit on, well, you focused on financial literacy and economic access. I think you did talk a little bit. What are the biggest misconceptions that underserved communities have about finance?
Ooh, I feel like everything, and a little bit of background on that, which is part of what I wanted to talk about today about advocacy. So advocacy is not just there's different types of advocacy, like we were saying, right? It's like it can be like the political advocacy, community advocacy, and some people thrive more in community advocacy. I have friends that they love doing community engagement, doing like community events, and they hate doing lobbying or like anything that has to go, like be about like lobbying Congress or like going to talk to whoever in the political space. On the other hand, I have a lot of friends that like love doing that part of the advocacy, and both are very important, right, for advocacy. But you don't need, at the end of the day, like advocacy could be whatever you want it to be as long as you are trying to make a change, right? So even the title of this webinar, like building power, like power is more that influence, right? You're trying to build influence to to achieve the change that you want. So sorry, where I was going with this. So yeah, so advocacy can take many like shapes, and volunteering is one of them, which is how I started my volunteering with financial literacy and AI education for underserved communities. I was just started volunteering at a local nonprofit, and then throughout that work I decided to just start my own company. It's like the social enterprise Munai, and I'm still a project like it's on pause right now because I'm trying to focus on other things. But it's really just trying to is a nonprofit to try and increase financial literacy among specifically like immigrant communities, like recent arrivals, and but also any other marginalized community that needs that knowledge to kind of like advance economically. And I feel like the biggest challenge is there's a lot of biggest challenge, not just with the people I've helped, but even with my own family, right? It's just they never had anyone to sit down and explain things to them, right? Because like some people don't have, they have never had any type of education, even like a high school education, right? You're just here and trying to just make a living, and they're trying to just provide for their families. And I feel like when they see someone with their similar background, or like someone that could be their son, right? Or that could be their like a nephew or anything, it gives them a lot of less it makes them listen. It makes them understand what they really need to do, especially if you're not coming from a place, if you're coming from a place of like, you really want them to understand. You're not coming from a place of like, oh, look, I'm volunteering, I'm a good person. Like, oh, I'm volunteering because I have this like social guilt or whatever. Like, no, you're doing it because you see that work that could have helped you and your own family, right? So I feel like that's the biggest misconception. It's like people are willing to listen if you really take time to like meet them at their level and like really hear them out and like educate them in the way they want to be educated, right? Even with AI, I mean, how many I've taken like hours to try to convince people to use AI, especially like older individuals, because they think it's just gonna, take over the world and they're gonna steal all their data. So I have to like really go and explain, like, no, look, and like I show them, and so yeah, it's a process, but I feel like just patience is part of the solution.
No, yeah, and I definitely totally agree with that. I don't know if it's like intimacy is if it's if that's the word to use,
Yeah.
but that one-on-one connection definitely gets us far, if I'm being honest. That's been like my biggest support here at the university, connecting one-on-one with the advisors, one-on-one with my staff members, my bosses, has really gotten me out there. So, with this in mind, what is the most challenging thing about your job?
Ooh, my job, uh, I mean, at Capital One, it's a great job. I love my job, but it's very challenging in more in the like hard skills aspect of it. It's a lot of financial analysis. And so yeah, sometimes I'm looking at a spreadsheet for like 8 hours and I'm like my brain is just dead right at 5 p.m. So but that's like kind of like the trade-off, right? When you have some sort of like corporate job, especially like a big firm like Capital One or Amazon or Google or whatever it is, like the best thing is like you're gonna have a very competitive salary, right? It's very hard to get in, but once you get in, you're gonna make good money, right? However, you're gonna work a lot. You're usually when I talk to younger people, younger than me, I'm still young, but younger like students, usually people think of if you want to succeed, you have to do your job, and like I mean, you have to do your job, but it's like you have to go beyond that, right? It's not when people start saying like, oh, I'm only work 9 to 5 and that's it, and you should. But like if you really want to advance, especially as a minority or as a woman or as a queer person, like anything that you have to put a lot more effort into it, those things don't really apply to you because you have to do extra work. So and my schedule is very flexible. I can start work at like 10, right? But like some days I have to like finish like at 7, 8 p.m. Maybe one day I'll work like 3 to 4 hours, right? It's very it fluctuates, right? So so yeah, I think the most challenging part is just trying to like manage that time and the type of like heavy, kind of like boring job. But it's part of the of that industry at least.
Would you say the flexibility is the most rewarding part of it, or what would you say is the most rewarding?
The salary is the most rewarding part. Whoever, if you ever meet anyone, whoever, if you ever ask anyone working in finance, the salary will be the most rewarding part because the flexibility too, but that's very company specific. I feel like at Capital One or like at some banks, it's easier. When I was working for the IRS in consulting, it was way less flexible, I believe. When I was working at a private equity firm, that was even way less, right? Because and I had to be in person. Like at least now I have like a hybrid schedule and I can like work around. But also, I would say like the flexibility uh increases with the years, right? When you have an entry level position, you're not going to be very flexible because you're expected to work, you're expected to put in the work and like, do all the tasks and like learn all the skills, right? More than like just doing the work is like you're expected to learn and to like improve for your career. And then when you get like mid-level, which is almost where I'm at, like entry to mid, that's when you start like with like a management position, that's when it starts getting like busier because you're going to do a lot of more like heavy work or more challenging work, but your schedule gets usually very flexible or more flexible. But again, this is very dependent on the industry, on the company. But I feel like after COVID, since a lot of companies have hybrid schedules, it's like easier to like organize and like easier to like meet with people and kind of like work around your other uh kind of like priorities.
Okay. Um, Now going back to and please correct me if I'm mispronouncing it, Munai strategies.
Perfect.
What inspired you to go into to build Munai strategies, and then how do you balance it alongside your full-time role?
My volunteer work really, and how do I balance it? I don't. Just kidding. I so when I just was born out of the need that I saw with my volunteer job work, right? So I was really just teaching financial literacy and AI literacy courses Also, technically, when I was part of my grad school thesis, I did a kind of like a like AI in entrepreneurship thesis. So I wanted to implement that in some sort of way. Uh, so when I created, the company, it was really kind of like to be able to reach out to more local nonprofits so they could like connect me with their clients, with the people they help. So that way I could have more of an impact, right? And like eventually, again, it's on pause right now because of everything going on in my other jobs. But that's like one of my plans, especially for like local advocacy, is just like keep growing it. And like I have many friends that have helped me with some of the, workshops. I still have some of the clients that like reach out to me, on a bi-weekly basis because they need help with, most of them have businesses that I help them like grow and create. So they usually need help with, they're not really well versed with technology. So I actually help them with like marketing or like social media, or if they need like, I don't know, like anything, they'll just ask me, they'll just text me directly. So right now it's kind of like on the back burner, but yeah, eventually I do want to expand it a lot more, and like grow it.
Okay. Kind of like going alongside of that, where do you see the greatest opportunities for young professionals to influence systems from within?
Uh, well, first be inside the system, right? I feel like a lot of people, it's easier, I guess, to criticize a system or an institution when you haven't been within. And that's not for everyone, right? Not everyone is meant to be part of the system or like to change within the system. Like some people are meant to be that force that changes the system from an outside perspective, right? Through protesting, community advocacy, like it's change needs both, right? But like the more you the more you kind of put yourself in those situations of, you know, they'll be very uncomfortable for you, or like for you as an individual that doesn't or is not historically fit those systems or those organizational institutions. Just by your like existence and your presence within that space, that's enough to change the system. And of course, like if you are a more like a achieving person, then you want to like actually shape the if it's an organization like the bylaws or like create programs or like influence like mentorship programs. A lot of companies, and this is not just for like the nonprofit public sector, right? This could be like even a company. So like big companies, there was a time they didn't never had the like the business, I forgot, but like the equity and belonging groups, in major companies you have kind of like the Latino group, the Black group, Asian American API, well, you have all of them. So at some point those systems weren't there, right? As like more people with different experiences and life experiences like started like joining the system or joining the company, that's when you start seeing that change. Like it's not, I feel like sometimes we tend to assume because of the political discourse and all that things that are going on uh that people are used to kind of like the experiences, like your life experiences, right? And I feel like not many people. I really like since I moved to DC or like at least to American University or with some people at some work positions. Like I'm usually the first and only like first gen, right? I'm the only first gen, usually very few Latinos, very way less like Latino queer people. So like just for me being in that space, people have kind of like a perspective of 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 who I am, and like we're all just the same, but like the my perspective and my views are also valid. So if you're a first gen, if you're Latino, if you're any other minority, like just being in that space and taking space, not feeling like an imposter, right? Because like that imposter syndrome is very real for everyone. And I feel like when you're in those spaces, it gets really tough, right? Because you can't really connect with other people. And like what happened to me in grad school, it's like, yes, I had a lot of Latino friends, they were very privileged Latino friends. They did not know what like first gen or like, their parents were like lawyers or like all my friends. And I love my friends, right? But like when you're in that space, you need to find ways and outlets to connect with other people, which is why I created like the organizations and all those things. So what I would say to like, you students is just like try to be involved in as many things as you can, even if it's going to be uncomfortable, even if you think you don't fit, quote unquote. I think just being in that space is what really drives that change.
Um, are there any mistakes you made earlier in your career that you would like encourage students to avoid, especially with
Oh,
advocacy?
yes. I think like advocacy comes with a lot of humility, right? I feel like when you're young, you think you know everything, especially when you're in your early 20s. And I feel when you're in those spaces, you just think that the louder voices are the right ones, right? Which is usually not the case. So I think just going with an open mind into advocacy and in any engagement, trying to like really build or trying to really get your point across in an efficient way, right? Because just getting your point across is not enough for advocacy. You really need to get it across efficiently. And that means with like engaging in respectful conversation, like things like that. So I feel like a lot of times I was a little more abrasive, which again, that's just changes with age. And another thing would be not advocacy, but in general, just reach out and ask like directly. Like I feel like I never, because I would say I would never like reach out to like alumni or like people that I know could have like connected me with someone because like me da pena. Like I wouldn't want to embarrass, or whatever it is. So, and then I learned that like no, people are actually very willing to help you, especially if you're a student, especially if they can connect with you in any like shape or form. So I think just like ask. Like the worst thing they can say, like just send a LinkedIn message, just join the meeting, just if someone tells you like yes, it's okay, you can reach out to me, and they don't reply the first time, like, try to like follow up at least like twice. And if not, well then that's fine. But at least like keep asking for that help and that support from the resources that you have around you.
And I think this might be our last question. So, if you had the chance to relive attending CSULB, would you do anything differently, knowing like what you do now, the work you do?
Uh, No, no, and yes. I mean, no, because I feel like I was very intentional with the majors that I chose, like economics, international studies. I was very intentional in the ways I was in the orgs that I was involved with. Uh, I would say I would definitely start looking for scholarships and internships way earlier. I think I left all that for like my junior, senior year. And I feel like a lot more opportunities are there for like even freshmen and like sophomores or like earlier on, especially for scholarships. I feel like even though I got a fair amount of scholarships, I could have gone a lot more if I just put a lot more effort at the beginning of my like undergrad years. But yeah, I don't think I would do Long Beach was an amazing choice, and I don't regret really anything of the involvement or kind of like the initiatives that I was part of.
Okay, and then just one more thing. So for everybody who's listening, is there any advice for those who are interested in going into the same career that you have?
I think, and this is for this is just not just for like the like finance industry, right? It's just and I work with AI a lot, and even my grad thesis was about AI. So in the world, in this world that we're gonna have AI everywhere, and every year is getting more advanced, it's so important for people to have hard skills, especially like like people like in undergrad. I feel like because once you graduate, well, first the job market right now is terrible, so it's one of the worst like job markets for graduate or people with degrees in like decades. And second, you're going to be competing with a lot of people who have grad school degrees, right? So the way you have to position yourself is through those hard skills. So if you want to go into finance, then learn some financial coding, right? If you learn some like econometrics and like all the hard classes that no one wants to take, you have to take them. If you so like for you, for example, if you want to you're in criminology, right? So learn some data management skills. Learn how to, like the and probably you already are, but like like really emphasize on those classes that are going to give you those hard skills that are going to be make you a lot more competitive in the job market. So, because that's what you're going to put in your resume, right? And that's what a lot of people, especially recruiters, are seeing or looking for in like younger, like entry level positions. It's like, if it's okay if you can write, which is great, but like now AI can write a whole like report in like 2 seconds. So like are you good at like reviewing what the AI like put out, right? If you know coding, it's like, okay, AI can code in like 2 seconds. Are you good at like reviewing the output? And like those skills are like very, very important right now.
Okay, thank you very much. It looks like we don't have any more questions. Thank you once again, Mateo, so much for joining us today. Once again, for everybody who's listening, visit the alumni website in the weeks ahead to see this and other recordings, as well as the schedule of our upcoming virtual events. Reminder to sign up for CSU Voices to stay informed and take action on state and federal issues shaping the future of the CSU system. Lastly, make sure you follow us on LinkedIn. Thank you, everybody, so much, and go Beach.